In this episode, we'll take a look at the Aputure B7c Accent light. The Aputure B7c is an accent light that fits into most household fixtures with an E26 or E27 socket. It's an LED light. It is also an RGB light, so it can produce a whole bunch of different colors, and it can be color tuned all the way from 2000 Kelvin, very, very warm, all the way up to 10,000 Kelvin, very, very cool. So it also covers, of course, tungsten, which is where you're going to find most of your typical incandescent lights, and daylight as well, and well beyond both of those. So it's a really useful light for practicals on set. So for example, if you have a lamp within your set that's going to be in the frame, it's really useful for that because it's a 7-watt bulb, which means, and you can dim it, so it means you can really kind of dial in the amount of light that it's putting out so that it doesn't clip within your frame. One other thing that makes this unique from regular smart bulbs is that it has controls on the light bulb itself. So there are 3 buttons, a power button, and 2 other buttons. You can control not only the dimmer, but also the color temperature directly on the bulb without using any sort of app on your phone or tablet. One other thing that they took special care on with the design of this bulb is that it doesn't flicker. So you can go all the way up to 1/1000th of a second shutter speed, and you won't get any sort of flickering from this light. With other smart bulbs, there's a good chance you will. This bulb also has an inbuilt battery, and what I found is that when I turned the light on to 3200 Kelvin and turned it to full power, I was able to power it for 62 minutes. So even if you don't have power to your lighting fixture, you can still use it as a practical light and power it from its own internal battery. We used my C800 spectrometer to measure both the light output and the color quality of this. And what we found was that at 1 meter, set to 3200 Kelvin, so tungsten, we got a reading of 97 lux. And then at 5500 Kelvin at 1 meter, we got 123 lux. So it's not a huge amount of light output. But for me, the big important thing about accent lights and practical lights is you need the ability to dim them down, typically. Too much power, they'll just clip, and they will not be very useful that way, or you'd have to use an external dimmer. These are able to dim down, and you can really fine-tune it and get just where you want to be for your particular lighting setup. In terms of color quality, we measured spectral similarity index. Now, I'll go ahead and leave this up on screen so you can see the other color quality metrics as well. If you're more into those, we've got those as well. But to me, the most meaningful is spectral similarity index. What we found on this particular case was that when we measured the spectral similarity index, and this is basically just comparing a known reference light source to your LED light. And what we found here was that the B7c did really well when you set it to 3200 Kelvin and compared it to a tungsten reference. It came out with an SSI of 84 out of 100. And then when we set it to 5500 Kelvin and measured it against a D55 reference, the SSI score came out at 73. Now, what does that mean? Generally, if it falls below 70, there's a very good chance you're going to experience some sort of color rendering errors. So what does that mean in practical terms? Some of your colors are going to look off if you get below 70. Now, you can still experience some minor errors, but I think generally in the 70s, you're going to be pretty safe. And once you get up into the 80s, things are looking really pretty solid. So, and I generally find I don't have to do any sort of color correction and certainly not any secondary corrections in post. So that's really helpful. You can dim anywhere between 100% down to 0%. So it's nice you don't jump. It goes by 1% increments. So that's really helpful. It has 9 built-in lighting effects, which also can be useful. Paparazzi, fireworks, faulty bulb, lightning, TV, party, pulsing, cop car, and I think most usable, fire. The B7c, along with a bunch of newer lights from Aputure, are all controlled via an app on your mobile phone. So it uses a SidusLink app, and it connects via Bluetooth mesh. So what that means is that your phone is actually connecting to whichever the fixtures are closest to it, and they're all creating their own little Bluetooth network. So they can all communicate. So even if you're pretty far away from the farthest lighting fixture, as long as you can connect to one, that one will connect to the next one, and that'll connect to the next one, and so on and so forth, until you're able to control all of the lights. So I've never had a problem being able to control all of the lights that are SidusLink enabled. Now, the SidusLink can do a ton of different things. In fact, I would say with confidence that of all the apps for controlling lighting that I've used, This is definitely the most mature and the most feature-rich. It can allow you to do firmware updates for any of your lighting sources that are SidusLink compatible, but it also allows you to do a whole ton of things. For example, there is a source match feature, which allows you to actually match this light, for example, to your key light. So let me just show you how that works here really quickly. First of all, I'm going to go ahead and dial in a color here that is definitely not matching my key light, okay? So what I can do now is come over into source match. I just hold my phone up with the camera, I take a picture of the key light, and boom, now this is matching that in terms of its color temperature. There's also a picker option here, so if I wanted to replicate another color on my set, we're doing sort of our art design. I have a blue blanket here behind me. Let me just take a picture of that with the picker. Now this is matching that blue blanket behind me on the floor. So you can do a lot of really interesting things. Of course, as I mentioned before, there are all those different effects. There's also a gel mode where you can match other lights that are not necessarily SidusLink capable. So for example, if you have some old incandescent or tungsten lights, you can say, for example, you have a tungsten light with a 1/8 CTB gel on it. You can dial in tungsten 1/8 CTB and it will match that. So just a lot of really great options to very quickly get to where you need to go with this light. As I mentioned before, there is an internal battery in the bulb, so even if you do put the bulb in a fixture, but that fixture doesn't have AC power, you can still use it just like this. And as I mentioned before, we got 62 minutes of powering time at full power. And of course, if you have a long shoot, you screw the bulb into a standard socket with AC power, you can power it all day long. One last thing that I very much appreciate about this bulb is that it is passively cooled. There is no fan in it. And that's really important, I think, for an accent light because those are on set. Those are near your actors or your talent. And you don't want something that's bringing more noise near your microphones. So I really, really appreciate that about this light. Now let's quickly cover a couple of things that might be cons in some circumstances. Number one is that there's just not a ton of light output. It's an accent light, so it's not supposed to have a ton of output. So if you're expecting to do something more extreme like this, like maybe pop this into a China ball or a lantern, it's really not made for that. I don't know if it's going to have enough light output for that unless you're using the China ball as a practical. But it's not a ton of output, but I think that's just fine for an accent light. Secondly, because of the design of the bulb itself with the aluminum heatsink, it does, as you can notice here, it basically pushes light up and out, but not down. And so you can see there's kind of a distinct line. That could be a problem for some of you, depending on what you're trying to accomplish with your practicals. And in some fixtures, it really depends on the fixture as well. So just something to note, deal breaker, I'll let you decide. So there's a look at the Aputure B7c, another addition to the Aputure ecosystem, which looks really more compelling day by day as these new lights come out. Makes it a lot easier to get your lighting designs dialed in quickly. Hope that was helpful. If you have any questions, go ahead and leave those down below. And if you've not already subscribed, make sure you do that. And we'll be sure to get you more great videos on how to improve your lighting and sound for video. Talk to you soon.